So welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and it pleases me to say that this is going to be a replay from the latest build for 0.97's test patch, and this is going to be fairly interesting because there's quite a lot of new things that we're actually going to see in this battlefield. I think from all of these factions, maybe not from Dol Amroth, actually I think most of the work on them has already been completed, but certainly from the other three, even if it just comes down to new unit models, like from Ladris over here, there are going to be new stuff to, well, there is going to be new stuff to talk about with regards to everything on the field today. And of course there is the new balancing of 0.97 to take into account as well, where infantry, spears in particular, are a little bit stronger, sort of the more expensive archers are a little bit better, that sort of thing that I've kept saying about in pretty much every video, even in 0.96, where I'm mentioning what is going to be different in 0.97, so it'll be good to see those things in action here. And this one was sent to me actually by Kuro, but we're going to be seeing it from the perspective of Dreezy 4K, playing as his and many other people's favourite faction, it must be said, in the realm of Imladris, and something which actually was brought to my attention in the last video for Reforged that I released was that Imladris may be losing their pikes. I've not heard of this. Apparently the source of this information was Scouts of Entertainment. I want to go on record and say that I think that would be a dreadful idea. I mean, trying to make Imladris a cavalry-centric faction is all well and good, but part of the real appeal of Imladris is the fact that their infantry is so strong. If you take away their pikemen, particularly with how good their pikes actually are, you take away a really solid pillar that they've got. I mean, I personally don't see the logic behind that. I mean, the chopping and changing which is going on at the moment concerns me a little bit, I have to say, but that's, I think, as a topic for another time. For the time being, I don't really want to get into my view on what's actually happening with regards to the new things that are being added to 0.97. I don't think this is really the right place to talk about that. But yeah, I don't think the Imladris pikes should be removed at all. I think that they should remain in place. Heavy elite infantry and elite cavalry is the thing that sets Imladris apart from the other elves. And if you start taking away individual elements of that, if you start micromanaging too much with regards to some of these factions' rosters, nothing is ever going to get completed. And there's already an element of feature creep that's already getting into development a little bit from an outside perspective. I can certainly say that that is the case. Regardless, now that the mini rant is over, we'll get into the Imladris army composition, and of course the general is going to be in the Gwaith y Rhokdor, and that's a sort of reversion to the old name. They used to be called the Doomsmen of Vada in the 0.97 test build, but they're now the Gwaith y Rhokdor once again. So again, obviously the High Elven Knights. I think they are still, individually speaking, the strongest units of knights in the game. They are very, very potent. Very expensive, of course, in Imladris. They don't have the numbers to put around this unit of knights like some of the other factions do, like Rohan, Dol Amroth, Khan, some of the other cavalry factions as well can do similar things like Arthedain, but as an individual unit, very, very powerful. And then over here we also have the Eldorenway Lancers, which of course are they aren't multiple HP, but they do still have the full charge bonus of 20, I believe, and obviously they have those nice shields, nice armor values as a single unit of Lancers go. Outside of the bodyguard tier where, you know, multiple HP starts to become more of a factor, the Eldorenway Lancers are the strongest, I believe. And again, this is just another sign that Imladris don't really need much more cavalry to make them a very strong cavalry faction. Like, they are already that, so I don't really see the logic behind chopping and changing and maybe adding a few more cavalry units when they don't really need it. Like, I don't really think anyone is going to be bringing other units of cavalry just because their elites are so strong. Like, if you start bringing sort of more lower tier units, I doubt people will bring them quite so much. We also have the Riders of Bruinen here, which obviously the Horse Archers, again, as an individual unit, very, very strong, especially with their armor upgrade. They mitigate the main weakness that Horse Archers tend to have, which is they can be zoned out by Foot Archers. But the Imladris Archers are tankier. They can be overwhelmed in terms of numbers by a faction like Khand or Rohan, but again, as far as an individual unit of quality goes, that's where Imladris really, really shine. Then, one of the new unit models we can look at here from Imladris are the new Noratirno Warriors unit model. So again, they've just been brought a little bit more into line with the style that Imladris now have, with sort of the dark blue and the sort of the darker leathers. So, and again, I think this is Dreezy's work as well. Dreezy certainly has sort of taken on the mantle of overhauling some of Imladris's unit models, and I do think the Noratirno Warriors, because that was a unit model that has been in use ever since vanilla, it did look a little bit out of place. It didn't look quite so up to scratch with everything else that's being added, so I'm glad that the Noratirno Warriors now look the part, because honestly the upgraded Eldar Quinga looked far cooler than they did. Now it's much of a muchness really, now they've been brought more into line with one another. One unit model from vanilla, however, that's always going to be staying is going to be the Eldorenway unit model, of course, that gold, the classic look from the opening scene of the first movie. The Eldorenway Archers are here. nice to see that some of the names are actually a little bit easier to say now. Including, we have some Bruinin River Wards, which obviously, again, the more standard heavy elven swordsman for Imladris, sort of the equivalent to the other units like the Hiri Lang or the Mithlon Blade Masters. However, the Eldarenwe Blade Masters are a different beast altogether. They are a step above, and this is one of the units which can really set, the Imladris infantry apart a little bit. The Imladris Guardians with the armour upgrades, obviously very, very powerful heavy line infantry, and also the Eldarenwe Spears here at the front. So, again, the Eldarenwe heavy elven spears, of all of the heavy elven spears, the Eldarenwe spears are the strongest. They are also, however, the most expensive, so there is that to bear in mind. A faction I'm really looking forward to seeing in this battle, however, are Lothlorien, played by Kuro Guro-chan, because we should be seeing all of the new projectiles in play. So the March Wardens of the Wood, they have poison arrows, so you'll be seeing black trails follow behind their arrows. It essentially will drop the morale of any units that they shoot, so it essentially has the same effect as fire arrows, only fire arrows, I believe, both take up more ammunition and they also fire slower. That is not something that applies to the poison arrows, so it's just a straight upgrade, and it's something that Lothlorien can use to great effect, especially against lower morale factions. Obviously, like the Orcs, if they charge forward with a low tier army, their morale is going to be shredded long before they get there, not only from the damage, but also from the debuff. We also have the Kindred of Celeborn, which I believe have the split shot arrows, which, again, their arrows split into 3 in flight, so it essentially has the effect of, even though they are a smaller unit, their arrows will still do the same amount. Well, the amount of volume going down range is going to be similar to a bigger unit of archers, only of course the Kindred of Celeborn are a high tier unit, so it definitely sets them apart a little bit from their peers. And then the Watchers of the Golden Wood, obviously previously the Galathrun Nobles, I believe have the Silverthorn, which essentially are projectiles with heavier mass. So the Demons of the Desert, their javelins often knock a lot of people over. That's a similar effect that the Wardens of the Golden Wood are going to have. Unlike something like the Demons of the Desert, though, where if someone gets hit by them, they're probably going to die. The Wardens of the Golden Wood, this is not body piercing. It's worth saying they will not be able to do ranger. They will not be able to get ranger levels of kills with their arrows alone. It will be more for sort of breaking up the advance. If a whole army is charging across the field, then they will be able to sort of knock a lot of them over and make the advance a little bit more staggered, in addition to doing decent damage, but not body piercing. More March Wardens of the Wood. We also have some Lorien Warriors, as well as some Spears of the Wood. So Spears of the Wood, obviously just the basic spears. They've been given a unit overhaul as well to bring them more into line with the Lothlorien style. The Lorien Warriors, one of the very few Elven units which is a dedicated AP shock unit. This is something that Lothlorien certainly have over the other Elven factions. We also have the Inner Council, who have also been given a unit overhaul to bring them a little bit more into line with Lothlorien style. Lothlorien Mounted Company as well, very similar in many ways to the Eldarenwe Lancers that we saw over the other side. However, I don't believe they have the full charge bonus of 20, and you can also bring 2, I believe, before the cost increases, but melee cavalry is one area where Lothlorien are certainly lacking, so you do need to be careful there. And then we have the Riders of the Golden Wood, obviously arguably the single strongest unit of horse archers in the game. That would be something worth testing, I think, when 0.97 is fully out. But obviously very, very good in melee, very, very damaging. But they are limited in numbers like most of the very good Elven units are. Now, moving on, we have Dol Amroth, played by Starling. He's got some Dorananil swordsmen on the front line, just some militia swords for some numbers, I assume, because while Dol Amroth do have some quality on foot, for the most part you can always assume as Lothlorien to have an infantry advantage over Dol Amroth. One area in which Dol Amroth certainly can press home an advantage is in cavalry, though, as I'm sure you can see from Starling's army. A couple of units of pikes as well. The rest, however, I think is entirely cavalry, so we'll see, trying to get in and amongst those Lothlorien archers. We have the Arathirim of Dol Amroth, which are the Lance Knights that Dol Amroth have available to them. Slightly lower in numbers than most other knight units, it must be said, similar to the, is it the Alcarondas Faithful, I believe, are the melee knights from Umbar and Numenor. But the reason for this is the fact that Dol Amroth essentially have 2 units of knights, so they have the Arathirim and they have the Knights of Corbas Haven, but obviously, you and I know them as the Haven Knights. And this is because if you had both of these units at 33, it would be extremely difficult to stop, just because Knights are so powerful. These guys may not have as big a charge, the Haven Knights of course, but they're such a powerhouse in melee against other cavalry, and in conjunction with the rest of Dol Amroth's army, the Arathirim need to be toned down a little bit. It is still very expensive to bring both, and a bit of a risk, to be fair. But even so, you do need to limit the amount of knights that are on the field, otherwise we're back to the old days when Reforged used to be all about how much really, really durable cavalry you could field on the battlefield. Then a couple of units of Knights of the Silver Swan. I'll be interested to see how they perform. A little bit lackluster in 0.96. We'll see if in 0.97 they can really sort of live up to their looks. The Pedophile Horse Guard as well. Obviously the replacement in many ways for the Merc Cavalry being gone, but they are better than the Merc Cavalry. More expensive, but this really hammers home Dol Amroth's advantage in a melee cav fight. Some cheaper Doradernal Cavalry, some Swan Knights, which again are another unit of melee cav, and then the Pedophile Randirim, very good horse archers as well. And the final army, going through these compositions a little bit more slowly because obviously there is some new stuff to talk about. We have Khan, played by Rules 1, so it is a battle between two of the more infantry-focused Elven factions and two of the more cavalry-centric human factions. Khan, of course, much more about their numbers than Dol Amroth, however. They have a lot more cheaper options in their roster. Nomadic Light Infantry, of course, are just going to get absolutely mulched by Imladris Infantry and melee, but their purpose is just to pad out the Khan line. Some Nomadic Raiders as well. For the most part, Khan, their archers, when you consider their foot archers and their horse archers, they should actually be able to stand up to Imladris in a skirmish fight, because Imladris are the weakest of the Elven factions when it comes to their archers, but the strongest when it comes to their melee. More Nomadic Raiders back here. We have some further troops back here, the Nurad Footmen, which AP is not something you would normally bring. Well, against other Elven factions, AP, because of the lower skill and overall attack values, is something which doesn't help against the other elves, really. More limited against Lothlorien, I suppose, but Imladris it can certainly help, because while Imladris still have that Elven skill, they also have that heavy armour, which you need to get through somehow, and Khan certainly have some armour-piercing options. The Nurad Footmen are a decent one at that. We also have the Nurad Storm Guard, of course, the multiple HP Halberds. Potentially a very good choice, especially seeing as the elves don't have their pikemen, so that phalanx is going to be very difficult to rip down from the front. Brotherhood of the Axe as well, more AP, and a very strong AP axe unit at that, so they may not be able to match the elves for skill, but the AP will still be useful. We've got some Nomadic Marauders as well, who have traded in their thrown axes for javelins, which means that they are still AP. And having a look over here, of course, wouldn't be a Khandish army without a very strong mounted contingent, including the Nomadic Scouts, Javelin Cavalry. We have the Nurad Windblades, which are very, very strong melee cavalry in. If there are no archers targeting them, they should be able to defeat the Gwythi Rockdoor 1-to-1 in melee, just because that is their entire purpose for being. They're also very fast, unlike quite a lot of other cav. Not so fast as the very Cataphracts. You can see from all the armour that weighs them down, they're a little slower, but they are still knights. They will still be able to fight for themselves against the Imladris forces. And then a new unit. Of course, we have the Chariots of Khan. Another faction gets access to chariots alongside Rune and Linden now, and we now have pretty much the trifecta of all ranged weapons on chariots. Rune have got archers, Linden have got javelins, and now Khan have got crossbows. Very large crossbows at that. They look like Shuko Nu, actually, with that little box on top. I certainly hope they're not. The last thing we need are rapid-fire crossbows, OP. But yeah, the Chariots of Khan. What they're going to certainly hope for is the fact that the elves are a little bit more limited in terms of the ground they can cover on a map, so they'll have plenty of gaps and get in and amongst them and disrupt the Elven formation. So, without further ado, let's begin. The cavalry is going to be an important factor here. Certainly for the human factions, they're going to need to use their cavalry to its fullest effect if they're going to have any chance. Dol Amroth have got pretty much an entirely cavalry-centric army, and you can see already Dol Amroth is moving their very limited infantry force over to help out Khan. Khan, of course, do have this high ground that they can take advantage of. And I can certainly see why they would want to do that, although you can see also immediately over here that Imladris is starting to move over to Lothlorien. Someone is going to have to make the first move, and we'll see who this is. I mean, no one really has more of a right than another here. It is a 2v2, even funds, so it is a very big hill, so I can certainly see why the elves would not want to charge up the hill. But by the same token, Dol Amroth and Khan are not going to want to charge into the jaws of the new Lothlorien skirmish force, and nor are they going to want to go toe-to-toe with Lothlorien or Imladris when it comes to just their melee power, because they will not win that battle of attrition. Lothlorien and Imladris have got too much quality. Kirin Amroth Rangers. Kirin Amroth Rangers? So that's obviously the Lothlorien Rangers. So there is body piercing on the field today. We might see some Dol Amroth Rangers, although I somewhat doubt it, considering the huge amount of expensive cavalry they have on the field. The Riders of the Golden Wood are moving outwards as well. But Dol Amroth have two horse arch units of their own, so they can zone this out. No foot archers though, so they're not going to be able to completely dominate. Also, the Riders of the Golden Wood should... Yeah, you can see the Parathil Randirim already firing off, and there goes some of the unique projectiles. Are those Silverthorn arrows? Well, regardless, they did manage to kill off a couple of units of the Parathil Randirim, but Honestly, I think that the horse archers for the red team here are going to be a less important part of their army, because with how Imladris and Lothlorien have already set up very defensively, the Lothlorien skirmishers are going to be able to sort of zone out a lot of the horse archers anyway, and can't actually only have Jav Cav anyway. So this is going to come down, I think, to... There is going to be a moment in this battle where the infantry lines engage, and there will be gaps that the red team can take advantage of with their lance cavalry, all forms of it. And they are going to need to take advantage of that when the time comes. Meanwhile, you can see here the poison arrows, the black trails, so the morale is already going to be dropping. It's not the best shot for them though, because they do have to sort of fire up into the air, and also it's sort of hitting only the side of this unit over here. But nomadic light infantry, you can sort of cripple their morale a little bit more easily perhaps than others. This is an interesting move, the Riders of the Golden Wood shooting their arrows into the Parathil Randirim and winning as well. Only a couple of the Riders of the Golden Wood have actually fallen so far. The Parathil Randirim are a very strong horse arch unit as well, so it just goes to show how powerful these Lothlorien horse archers are. Just on their own, they're able to go toe-to-toe with a numerically superior unit, and two of them at that. But the Horse Guard are over here supporting them to make sure that those Lothlorien mounted companies, or Lorien mounted companies, cannot charge in and get into those horse archers for a lot of easy kills. But Lothlorien's cavalry is going to have to be very careful, because if it overextends itself, it's going to get eaten alive by all of this Dol Amroth cavalry. Yeah, this comes down, I think, entirely to how well the red team can use their lancers. If the blue team can do a good job of containing them, then I don't see how the red team wins this, because they certainly don't have the melee power. Khand have got a little bit more infantry than Dol Amroth. They just don't have the ability to go toe-to-toe with Imladris and Lothlorien in a quality fight. Not with what they brought anyway. Eldarenway Lancers waiting out there on the wings. The nomadic light infantry pushing forward. The nomadic raiders pushing forward. Varian Cataphracts and the Nurad Windblades coming over here as well. They probably want to avoid the Imladris horse archers, especially the Windblades. But from a pure melee perspective, Khand might fancy their chances here, especially with their Jav Cav in close support. There's also the chariots, which again could prove to be a very, very important part of the hopes of the red team here, because they can certainly do a lot of disruptive work, tie up a lot of those Lothlorien skirmishers perhaps, cause a few gaps in the lines for Dol Amroth's cavalry to then come in and deliver the killing blow. As you can see here, the Parathil Randirim proving to be no match for the Golden Company, or the Riders of the Golden Wood, I should say. Yeah, they're dropping like flies here in the Parathil Randirim. You can see now that the Dol Amroth cavalry actually retreated away because they were the ones getting shot. But this did allow the Parathil Randirim to be charged by the Lorien Mounted Company, and that means they are going to rout. Now the Mounted Company, they are Lancers, so they won't really want to be at melee with the Dol Amroth melee cavalry, but the Dol Amroth melee cavalry trying to chase off the Riders of the Golden Wood. This could prove to be the end of this unit of Lothlorien Mounted Company, however, as both units of Parathil Horse Guard come in for the kill. And there's also the Swan Knights in close proximity as well, so that's 3 units of powerful melee cavalry. Meanwhile, what have we here? Khand actually charging in there. Actually no, it's Imladris charging into Khand. And you can see here the Nurad Windblades coming in to try and stop the advance of both of the very powerful units of Imladris cavalrymen. The Gwaiti Rockdor and the Eldarenway Lancers retreating now. They are getting hit by arrows on the retreat. But they're only nomadic raiders, so with the Imladris armour they should be just fine. You can see here the Gwaiti Rockdor being hunted down by the Nurad Windblades, but the Nurad Windblades here, their unit is very stretched, which is honestly going to end up costing them this fight, I think. Although I say that, the Nurad Windblades doing a good job there. They did get the charge. The Nurad Windblades need to be a little bit careful as the Eldarenway Lancers come in. Off the charge they could take a little bit of damage, but in sustained melee the Eldarenway Lancers would certainly lose to the Nurad Windblades. The Gwaiti Rockdor were pointing the wrong way and took a charge in the rear, which is probably why they took such a savaging there. But now the action has certainly shifted over to the Khandish front. I'm actually a little bit surprised. The Riders of Brunnen getting into their shooting circle formation, trying to kill the Nurad Windblades. They don't have the best shot though, because their own cavalry are in the way. Very much a back and forth here. Neither team is eager to commit fully. But I think... yeah, you can see now that the Nurad Windblades certainly becoming the target of all of the High Elven archers, which is their main weakness. They do not have as much armour as a lot of other knight tier units, nor do they have a shield. Their entire purpose for being is basically to assassinate other high tier units of cavalry, and they're now shaken. They're just being overwhelmed. So yeah, I think Rules certainly got a little bit too greedy there with his Nurad Windblades. He should have been happy, I think, with the fact that he killed off a few of those knights and a few Eldarenway Lancers and then just retreated out. Especially seeing as he's basically occupied the old Imladris stakes there. So far this has a bit more of a feeling of a tournament match though. Neither side is eager to commit. Both of them have gone perhaps for more defensive setups. I mean, with all of this cavalry, that seems a little bit weird to say, but based on the fact that the elves have essentially employed a bit of tactical geometry, the cavalry cannot move in, because otherwise it's just going to get mulched. I think that this is, again, a little bit too little too late from the Khandish cavalry. It's good to see that they are actually retreating now, but the Variag Cataphracts, they were going to charge in, but there's nothing left to save now. Or is there? I mean, there are still some Windblades out here on the rocky section of the map, still hunting down the riders of the Bruinen, but they're not going to be able to kill off the entire unit, and they're still going to have ammo, so... But yet there you can see how fast the Nurad Windblades are, able to get away from the heavier Elven cavalry, and they're just going to be able to swiftly run away. The Variag Cataphracts obviously much more in line with a lot of the other heavy human cavalry, with that very thick armour. You can see the Dol Amroth are moving to meet up with Khand now, so again, this is just another phase of the battlefield where, again, neither side is wanting to fully commit yet. These smaller engagements are still continuing. Now, this is a fight which is definitely going to go in favour of Khand. A charge from those Variag Cataphracts doing a decent amount of damage to the Eldarenway Lancers. The Knights obviously do have an anti-cavalry bonus, whereas the Lancers do not. And the Elven Horse Archers in shooting circle, I mean, the Variag Cataphracts, multiple HP, very thick armour. They're not going to be too bothered, honestly, about taking damage from the Riders of Bruinen. If anything, the opposite really should have happened. The Cataphracts should have been the ones to try and take the Elven Horse Archers head on. The Windblades should have been the ones to come in support, quickly covering the ground that they needed to get up in support if needed. But again, hindsight is 2020. What's going on over here? The Elven Cavalry moving up and to the rear, claiming the high ground. Perithil Horse Guard are here, the Riders of the Golden Wood, flanked by both units of Lorient Mounted Company. I'm surprised that Dol Amroth are not actually answering this challenge. They're content to actually let Lothlorien take this high ground, and the Riders of Goldenwood surely have got a bit more ammunition, so that's going to be a real problem, particularly for nomadic marauders if they are the ones that get targeted. Meanwhile, right to the edge of the map, Riders of Bruinen are now firing. The Nurad Windblades giving the Gwythi Rockdor there the runaround. Nice bit of micro. But unfortunately for them, I think what they're actually going to be able to achieve is very limited. They are going to be able to get in there, but the Knights are going to hunt them down. Meanwhile, I do believe... Yeah, the Variag Cataphracts did get another charge into the Eldarenway Lance, and those Lancers are on their last legs. So overall, Khand and Imladris really having a bit of a cavalry duel at this point in time, and neither side has really had what you would consider to be the better of it so far. I mean, you could argue Khand, because they've done more with slightly less. They've committed less in terms of money to this engagement. So I guess you'd give the slight edge there to Khand. But the problem is Khand need to have a little bit more of a convincing win in that respect, because Imladris have got far more in terms of infantry power to their name. Let's have a look and see what's going on over here. So the March Wardens of the Wood out on the front. Noritino warriors are now reloading as well, so they're in range. They're going to be shooting in. That Elven accuracy is certainly going to come into play here. And this is playing into the Elves' hands, I think, so far, because the longer this battle stays like this, bit of a face-off. Oh, hello. Here into the backfields, the engagement is happening now, and now Dol Amroth have decided to pounce upon the Lothlorien cavalry, and this could be the end of the Mounted Company. In fact, I'm sure it will be. There's simply too much of the Dol Amroth cavalry over here. The Knights of Cobas Haven, not just anything can go toe-to-toe with the Riders of the Golden Wood, but this is one of the finest units of melee cavalry in the game. Here come the Knights of the Silver Swan, here come the Arathirim. Yeah, this is overwhelming force on the Lothlorien cavalry, which is bad news for the elves, because this means that most of their mobility now has been dealt with, whether by Khand or by Dol Amroth. They have managed to secure themselves the cavalry advantage they needed. And they will need this. I mean, particularly from a Dol Amroth perspective, their army was so cavalry heavy that they really needed to secure the cavalry advantage for their team. If they didn't, they would have been in real trouble. Now, however, they have the freedom on the field to be able to get in behind all of these units and start doing some work. There's a lot, however, of Lothlorien projectiles going off, so you can see the Warns of the Golden Wood. There's a lot of blood spray going up here, the Silverthorn arrows. You can see there the split shot. A lot of projectiles coming in here, trying to kill off the very lightly armoured nomadic marauders, so the Kindred of Caliborn going after the unit that they see as the weak link. The Lorien Mounted Company did get a charge into the Brotherhood of the Axe, but were swiftly made to regret that decision with the nice damage that the Brotherhood of the Axe can deliver. And the chariots are now wheeling around here as well. And you can see here that this is one of the things which Lothlorien, a real feather in their cap for the upcoming patch. The fact that they now have, I think, become the archer kings of the game with this. They have rangers, they have everything they really need. And these extra projectiles, I think it does push them above Mirkwood for archers. Mirkwood have got stuff like Ents coming their way, which will sort of help them out in those terms, but still, Lothlorien, they have arrived. Meanwhile, Marchwards of the Wood charged forward. Elven archers that were out of ammunition, but they were essentially just fed into the wood chipper, really, as the vastly numerically superior Khand army, in conjunction with the support of some Dol Amroth cavalry and the Khandish cavalry, doing the business. The Riders of the Bruinen not really going to be able to do as much damage as they perhaps need to. They're trying to go after the Variag Cataphracts, I think, but the shields, the armour, the multiple HP, I think Khand will accept that engagement. Still not an all-out assault just yet, and again, considering the cavalry-focused approach of one team and the archer, at least the more defensive-focused approach from the elves in particular, trying to build around these new Lothlorien skirmishers, they were never going to charge forward quickly. Especially not with all of these Dol Amroth lances around, they can't afford to charge in quickly. Meanwhile, the Brotherhood of the Axe, taking a lot of arrow fire there from Lothlorien. These arrow trails, of course, do have the added... It's not really... It's more of a benefit for the other team. The arrow trails let the other team see what you're targeting, so they can more easily react, whereas normally the arrows don't have trails in Medieval 2. So it can be... You have to sort of see your unit losing models in real time. Well, you can see the Kirin Amroth Staff Masters are coming forward. It'd be interesting to see how well they do. I mean, the Doranernal Swordsmen are militia units at best, so you would certainly expect them to be able to do the business against the most basic of Dol Amroth units, especially with some spears also moving forward. So there are the Staff Masters. I believe the same principle does apply to them. They have a huge amount of defensive skill, but not a lot of damage. So that is their little niche. Not that they'll need a lot of damage to go toe-to-toe with the Doranernal Swordsman. Meanwhile, there is still a unit down here. Nomadic Light Infantry are going toe-to-toe now with the Noraturno Warriors, but the Noraturno Warriors pulling out a dagger and an axe in melee. That's pretty cool. Varied weaponry. But obviously the Noraturno Warriors, their selling point over the Eldar Quinga was always the fact that they were slightly stronger in melee, noticeably stronger in melee. So this should be just fine for them, especially against Nomadic Light Infantry. Nomadic Light Infantry really is just trash. Perithal Horse Guard, backed up by the chariots of Khand. The Riders of Bruinen are just being run down now by the chariots. The elephant sound effects playing in the background. This is where the elves may start to struggle. The backlines are starting to be exposed a little bit. There is the split shot. They are going after the Arathurim of Dol Amroth, and they were caught napping. Caught on their heels. They're now being pelted by javelins. They got charged by shock infantry, and they're getting shot by arrows. That good. They do have multiple HP, so they are going to be able to survive that for a little bit. They need to get out of there. They need to cycle out, because Elven shock infantry, especially with those arrows as well. The Inner Council, I mean, the Knights of the Silver Swan, I think that was a panic charge more than anything else. They was like, oh damn, they're javelins, I need to charge in there. But it was a relatively poor charge. And also, the Inner Council, the spears in melee. And with the buffs to spears, that's going to be very bad for the Dol Amroth cavalry. They did manage to save their Arathurim, even if they took a bunch of heavy losses. The Knights of the Silver Swan using their mass, heavy cavalry there, pushing through the lines. They're going to get into the Marchwards of the Wood that still have ammunition, so obviously this is going to be a very good engagement for Dol Amroth indeed. The Doranernal cavalry is charging, and I think this is ultimately what's going to be the problem for Lothlorien. They've gone for a very skirmish-heavy build. There are the Kirin Amroth Rangers. But they don't have enough infantry to cover their flanks. They did have that cavalry. All of those units, however, very, very expensive. I would back Dol Amroth to find the gaps here. They should, anyway. And, well, there goes the General. As part of the Kindred of Caliborn. who are back here, I believe. Yes, they are. So he just got assassinated by the Parathil Horse Guard and the Swan Knights. They are shaken, so they are going to pay for that. And it is worth saying that, of course, Elven Archers in melee are not soft targets, so the cavalry is going to need to be well microed, and there have been a few lapses in concentration here by Dol Amroth. Microing this amount of cavalry units is difficult, and it's obviously very easy for me to sit here and criticise when it's in slow motion. But a lot of these cavalry units are starting to waver, and if Dol Amroth loses their cavalry, there is no chance they defeat the Lothlorien forces in melee, even if Lothlorien are mostly skirmish focused. And Kharn need to move. Like, honestly, Dol Amroth are starting to get more and more damaged. Imladris is sending over more and more reinforcements to help out, and Kharn are just sort of sitting there on the periphery. They may not want to get into melee with Imladris, but their ally is in dire straits at this point, I think. They managed to kill the Lothlorien general, but it's not looking good, with Imladris reinforcements on the way forward. The only units they've really managed to kill off are the Staff Masters on the front line. The Pikes are moving forward as well, but I just don't see how Dol Amroth can sustain this assault with their cavalry. I think Lothlorien, especially with those Imladris units in support, just have too much for the Dol Amroth cavalry, considering the damage they've already taken. Some of the Dol Amroth cavalry is also waiting over on the other side in support of the Khandish army, which is now moving forward, but this is bad. The Inner Council have managed to sort of free themselves as well, so they are going to be throwing their javelins, and in they go. I think they're going after the Parathil Horse Guard, who are routing here as well, so Dol Amroth's morale taking a lot of hits, and this again could come down to the fact that these March Wardens of the Wood, they've been using their poison arrows. You can see the black trails. It is having an impact here on the Dol Amroth forces, especially on lower tier units like the Doran Ernil Swordsmen. They're going to be sent running very, very quickly by any morale shocks. And when they're in melee with elves, that's already going to... their morale is already not going to be great. The poison arrows are just going to be something which tips them over the edge. Lorien warriors, the Inner Council still here. Let's go up to full speed again. The Knights of the Silver Swan have actually been doing very well. They've actually survived where a lot of the other Dol Amroth cavalry has not. That bit of a slow charge. They didn't have their lances out, but that unit of spears there is stuck between a rock and a hard place. Hammer and anvil, pretty much in the most classic sense of the word. What's going on up here? Is this the chariots? Nope, it's just a very depleted unit of Horse Guard, and they've gone into a unit of Sword Masters, which has, well, heavy swordsmen, which I believe still have their anti-cavalry bonus. Here come the Khandish infantry, but I think the elven quality is just going to be too high. I think that's what's going to see them over the line. Noraturno warriors intercepting the Nurad footman. The Knights of the Silver Swan coming in support. So these Noraturno warriors are a little bit isolated at this point. But these Doran Ernil swordsmen are not going to stop the Eldoranway Blade Masters for too long. Meanwhile, those Spears of the Wood still alive. And Lothlorien continuing to pull back, trying to get their archers into a good position again. They still have their firing squad, they still have a lot of ammunition. Here come the Knights of the Silver Swan. They do have their lances down. They're going after the March Wardens of the Wood. But they were partially intercepted by the Watchers of the Golden Wood. And obviously in melee, too strong, and that's going to be enough to rout them off. Poison arrows in melee with a very, very powerful infantry unit. That's going to be enough, and they already have taken a lot of damage as well. Some of the Dol Amroth cavalry is starting to come back, but the cavalry force for Dol Amroth is looking a bit thin on the ground. Kharn are now coming forward, but I think it might be too little too late, because Nurad footmen are being asked to go up against Imladris Guardians. Imladris Guardians are just too strong for a unit like Nurad footmen. They also have the support of Eldoranway spears in the back line, so it's not as if Kharn are going to have the easiest time wheeling around their mounted units to try and do damage to those back lines. They still have the Haven Knights, I believe. Well, they still have a strong unit of Knights of the Silver Swan. Where did the Haven Knights go? Ah, there they are, heading over around to the other flank of Imladris. You can see here the arrow fire still going after the Knights of the Silver Swan, charging into the Eldoranway Blade Masters. That is a decent charge, actually. Downhill, killing off a good amount there of Eldoranway Blade Masters, which that is the main risk of bringing the Eldoranway Blade Masters. Not being multiple HP means cavalry charges are a problem for them. But unfortunately for the Knights of the Silver Swan, they're just being targeted by all of the Lothlorien skirmishers. In addition to that, also the Brotherhood of the Axe have found themselves the target of a lot of the Elven Archers' affections in this battle. For good reason, they're a very strong unit. I'm actually a little bit surprised the Nurad Storm Guard have not found themselves the target of more arrows. They are being targeted now, but they could still turn this around. The human team, the Nomadic Scouts using their javelins at this point, the Eldoranway Spears caught out of position. All of the Kharn javelins have been saved until this point, but they are also still taking arrow fire. There's a lot going on all at once here. The Nomadic Marauders charging into melee, but the Eldoranway Spears are going to be able to deal with them relatively easily. That wasn't the best charge, and the Knights of Cobas Haven are of course melee cavalry as well. So they need to cycle out of here. The Eldorenway Spears will start to do pretty substantial damage the longer they stay in there. Spears in general are just better against cavalry in 0.97, and these are Eldorenway Spears, so they're some of the finest in the business. The Renano Cavalry, that's weaker cavalry, so still can be very good off the charge. Here are the Eldorenway Archers now proving themselves to be the main target of this Dol Amroth Cavalry. The Khandish Chariots are also in the backfield now. The Rangers, the target of all of this cavalry. This honestly I think is what probably should have happened slightly sooner from the human perspective. They now have the Haven Knights, they have the Chariots, they have supporting cavalry, they have what's left of the Variag Cataphracts, and they're ripping right through the middle of the Elves. But honestly at this point I'm not sure whether it's going to be enough, just because their infantry is in such dire straits. The Eldorenway Spears going after the Variag Cataphracts, the Chariots just ripping their way through the lines. The Inner Council are here doing their best. The River Wards are trying to slow down the Chariots, but the Chariots, there isn't any units that are in substantial numbers back here to slow the Chariots down, so they're going to be able to continue to do their thing. And that could be enough to turn this fight around, honestly. The Kindred of Caliborn are in melee, supporting the Lorien warriors. The Nurad Stormguard are getting a bit surrounded, but they are now going to be supported by their Chariots as they just rip and tear their way through the Elven lines. Again, not all of these units are dying, a lot of them will get back up, but the disruption these Chariots are causing, as well as the strength of the Haven Knights, the survivability, proving to be a problem. But you can see that there isn't a lot of human infantry left. Nomadic Scouts doing their best to try and pick away at the Elven infantry, but I think just at this point, while the cavalry is doing damage, the human infantry is just not able to do the business against the Elven infantry. You can see over here the Nomadic Raiders are up against River Wards. Very, very lopsided engagement there. The Elves always had the strongest infantry going into this fight. It was always going to come down, I think, to how well the humans were able to use their cavalry, and I think there was a very narrow window where the humans could have been able to use it, but they were just caught flat-footed a little bit, and I think that's going to be the end. I mean, the Khandish general's gone. The issues with morale have continued all throughout the game. The March Wardens of the Wood, with their poison arrows, trying to go after the Haven Knights, although the Haven Knights are very unlikely to break. The Javelins will do a lot of damage, however. The Watchers of the Golden Wood, the Kindred of Caliborn, still alive. The Kindred of Caliborn, are they still over here? They aren't. The Nurad Stormguard and the Brotherhood of the Axe are still over here. Those Eldorenway Spears have come in clutch here in the late game. The Nomadic Scouts charging in to try and do some damage to this blob of Elven infantry, but they just don't have it in them, I think, to shock the Elves off the field. The Haven Knights would with individual units, but they've already taken damage, and they can't put the whole team on their back and carry the humans to victory here, I think. And you can see here that the Chariot charging through the Elven lines over and over, taking bits of damage here and there, is starting to take its toll. Crossbow bolts doing their best, but you can see now the Chariots are starting to fall by the wayside. There goes Imrahil. Chaos has erupted here in the late game, a very slow and steady opening, and it always was going to be based on the... and that is Dol Amroth gone. So Dol Amroth actually rousing off before Khand, but Khand do still have an elite unit in the Nurad Stormguard holding things down, and they won't go down easily. Yeah. I think... it was always going to be difficult, I think. When you have that much emphasis on cavalry, especially from the Dol Amroth player in this battle, I mean, it was always going to be obvious, I think, that Khand and Dol Amroth, when they team up, are going to have some sort of emphasis on their cavalry, but even so, I think that the Elves weathered the storm pretty well. Early on, the cavalry engagements were inconclusive and then perhaps slightly favoured the red team, the humans, but the humans needed the cavalry engagement to be a crushing victory for them. Brotherhood of the Shadows moving forward, out of nowhere, but it's too late now. Again, they should have been committed forward sooner, I think. There's no sense in saving something for the late game if you're already in such a dire situation that nothing can possibly save the match for you. And again, it's a question of hindsight. I'm sure that the Brotherhood of the Shadows were just being kept in reserve to try and win it late on. I mean, Rules has a track record for doing that, keeping a unit in reserve and then revealing them towards the end and then going on to win, but that isn't going to happen here. Brotherhood of the Shadows, obviously an assassin unit. And yeah, this goes to show the Elven superiority in melee, especially when the opposing teams skimp a little bit on their infantry. Khand had a fairly decent infantry force, but Dol Amroth's was very, very bare bones, and it did not pay off for Starling in this case. It's always a risk when you go very heavy into cavalry like that. Especially against, Imladris have got a decent cavalry force of their own, so they managed to deal with Lothlorien's cavalry force nicely enough, though. And there come the archers in there as well. I think those are just the Eldarenway archers, yeah. I think all of the unique projectiles have already been used up. Watchers of the Golden Wood doing the business. The Inner Council have proved to be very important as well. The Brotherhood of the Shadows trying to throw their throwing knives to finish them off, the Lorien warriors. Now, however, they're just going to be jumped on by all of the Imladris heavy swordsmen, and that should be enough to break them off, although I think the Brotherhood of the Shadows might be one of those units which has locked morale. The Nurad Stormguard are actually shaken, which they've stuck around longer than most other units would. And it's very obvious what the result of this match is going to be at this point. But still a close game. For a 2v2, a close game. Good to see that this match wasn't on Grassy Plain as well. Grassy Plain is just, at this point, aggressively boring. And there we go. More units coming back. And I do think that one of the main reasons they did win this was the new Lothlorien projectiles. That Lothlorien archer superiority really did help them. The amount of damage they were able to do. Traditionally, an archer-heavy army can be countered by a cavalry-heavy army, but in this case, Lothlorien were able to defeat Dol Amroth on their side, and I do feel as though Starling maybe went a little bit too heavy on the cavalry.
It could have been we that were slain and defeated on the field, but fate has been kind and delivered us victory.
Like, his infantry was just so bad it crumbled underneath the elves. Like, you can't expect human militia units to go up against like the upper tier of elven infantry. It's just not going to happen. So maybe if I was to sort of suggest different compositions for Khand and Dol Amroth, for Dol Amroth, just go for a little bit more infantry. Like, yes, focus on the cavalry, because that is one area, particularly against Lothlorien on that side of things, is one area where Dol Amroth can hammer home a big advantage. But if you go that heavily into cavalry, your infantry is not going to last very long in melee at all. You need something on the front line which helps hold. The pikes can do that, but they need more support than militia. So, again, it's a delicate balancing act, I know, because a lot of these units that were being brought were very, very expensive. The Dol Amroth brought both of their knights, Khand brought basically both of their knights as well. Imladris brought all of their expensive heavy cavalry as well as some of their very high-tier Eldarenway units. Lothlorien brought all of their nasty skirmishers as well as all of their cavalry, which Lothlorien aren't particularly great in melee with other cavalry units. The Riders of the Golden Wood can do it, but the Mounted Company, while the Elven skill helps them against lower tier melee cav against Dol Amroth, it's not really going to work out. Certainly not in an efficient manner. But obviously Imladris getting the most kills, but they were primarily up against Khand. Dol Amroth actually still had a bigger army than the elves, despite being mostly cavalry. Let's see, Dreezy. This was who it was from the perspective of the Imladris Guardians, proving to be the MVPs. They were going up against like basic Khandish infantry in the middle, so they were just able to rip and tear their way through there. The cavalry was maybe... It didn't do badly, but neither did it win. If it had beaten those Khandish incursions, then this battle would have been very much in favour of the elves, but even so, I don't think Imladris can be too disappointed with that. I mean, it was very much sort of an even trade in terms of the cavalry, which you might be disappointed with as a player, but overall, it's considering the infantry and archer advantage that infantry advantage, but especially that Imladris were always going to have over Khand, I don't think Dreezy would have minded too much that the cavalry fight was inconclusive. Noratuno warriors doing very well also, both because of their arrows and because of their decent melee prowess. And the Eldarenway were only really committed towards the end. But the Blade Masters still managed to get over 200 kills. Very, very powerful, of course. So yeah, big thank you to Kuro for sending me this replay. Good to see that 0.97 is really starting to come along quite nicely, because I do think it is sorely needed at this point. I think 0.96 has outstayed its welcome at this point. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to 0.97. Looking forward to doing a campaign, of course. And yeah, hopefully I'll be able to show you a little bit more of 0.97 moving forward, including perhaps not only some of the additions to existing factions, but some of the new factions as well. I'll be interested to see how the new factions play. Obviously Dol Guldur, Ered Luin, Dorwinion, and then there is another that's being added as well. But more on that at a later date, I think, because that deserves a little bit more of a talking about from both me and a few others. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.